Hello, today I'm here to talk about how The Office failed to transition Michael Scott out of The Office. Warning, there will be spoilers ahead. The Office is a fun show to watch. It makes you laugh, it makes you smile, and one of my favorite characters on The Office was Michael Scott. Michael Scott made The Office feel like The Office. I mean, he was the boss of everything, and he had a lot of storylines surrounding him, as did Jim, Dwight, and Pam, but Michael was always, the kind of the center, the star of the show. So when I figured out that Michael Scott was leaving the show, I was hurt and I wasn't excited for him to leave. It felt like everything on The Office was about Michael Scott, like Michael Scott was a part of The Office and is The Office. So when he left towards the end of season 7, I could barely watch the next episode. In fact, I waited a year to start watching the series again because I just couldn't see The Office without Michael Scott. And when I came back to finish the show, I didn't enjoy it. There were a bunch of new characters who I wasn't familiar with, and I didn't enjoy watching them either, and it felt like they were just being dumped on us with really no explanation, and I didn't like them at all. So, I thought, what was wrong with this? Why was The Office so bad after Michael Scott left? And why couldn't I stand it? And then I realized it was because Michael Scott was not properly transitioned out of The Office. Even when he left, it just didn't feel like the end. It felt like there was more, and that Michael Scott was needed to carry on the show. I feel like the office should have ended when Michael Scott was leaving, and that should have been it, because he was such a vital part of the office. But the show could have continued if they did some things differently. Let's start comparing. So, The Office could have succeeded without Michael Scott if they properly transitioned him out of the show, like another show that properly transitioned out their two main characters who the show revolved around heavily for 2 seasons. This show is called The Game. The Game is a BET and CW show that revolves around the lives of football players and their wives and the people around them. This show had two main characters, Melanie and Derwin. Melanie and Derwin are the main couple in the show, and they have their friends who are kind of the side main characters with them. These characters received their own storylines. While Melanie and Derwin had big parts in the show, the remaining cast still had big hands in it. They had their own storylines, they would bring in new characters on their own, and each character felt like they got their fair share of time, where we would sometimes take breaks from Melanie and Derwin and focus on the other characters that were present in the show. So, when her friends Tasha and Kelly started receiving more screen time and Melanie got less screen time, it felt okay. We were used and familiar to these new characters. And when these new characters would bring in some more new characters, they were brought in with ease and fit into the storyline most of the time. So, when Melanie and Derwin did leave the game, we were already used to these new set of characters constantly coming in. These people on the cast didn't date the same people or stay involved with the same people. They were able to get out into the real world and meet new people and introduce us to some new characters who were genuinely accustomed to the show. They fit the same theme of the show, they weren't too different, but had just enough variations that we were able to become intrigued by them. So, when Melanie and Derwin officially left the game towards the end of season 6, and by the season 7, Derwin had already left the game, we were introduced to new characters that we could definitely depend on to keep the game going. We got Kiera Whittaker introduced to us on the show. We had the character Blue come to us, who fit very well. And he was kind of like a Derwin in a way. If you do watch the show, he was very lighthearted, he was kind of clever, and he was a fun and genuinely nice character. Kiara's character was a little bit sassy, but she still had the same sweetness that Mel did on the show. And then we have Brandy's character, Chardonnay, who was just a breath of fresh air to the show and was needed to kind of get us to like Jason, who was not always the most likable character on the show. And we have Jazz, who was used as a little bit of comedic relief on the show. And we have Pookie, who was also introduced to the show, who was Tasha Mack's love interest, but he was also a nice character who kept the pace of the show. Not super interesting, as Tasha Mack was already a dynamic character enough on the show. But what I'm trying to say is, even if you don't watch this show, The Game, these characters, these new characters, felt well known to us. We knew these characters because we had seen slight variations of them throughout the season, so it wasn't a shock that we were getting these new characters. Now, unlike on The Office, we saw something very different. On The Office, it was more of, oh, here's Pete and some other characters who we couldn't quite get into. But the point is that when new characters are introduced onto the show, it needs to be done throughout seasons, and these new characters need to stay on the show. We need to feel established and grounded with these characters, not constantly switching in and out new characters who won't really stay with us. And The Office didn't really know how to bring in new characters. Now, while the game has a much more dynamic setting, and The Office is set in The Office could have brought in new characters to us, and they did do this. We got these new characters, but they just weren't interesting. They tried to remain familiar to the show and keep them very basic, but they were too basic. And Nellie was Nellie. Robert California, not quite. He changed the tone of the show a little bit too much. But Andy and Karen are great examples of new characters who came into The Office and really fit the vibe of The Office. They were funny, there was something quirky that you could like about each of them, but to each his own. Some people were not a fan of these characters. Personally, I did not like Andy at first, but throughout his time on The Office, he was given some storylines that I was able to slightly care about, or interacted with some characters that did make me enjoy him. Karen and Jim were nice to watch. Although we didn't think it would stick around, these two characters were nice character introductions, and they fit into The Office nicely. Now, by the end of The Office, I feel these new characters that they had dumped on us, quite literally dumped on us. I mean, think about it. The new characters that came to stay on The Office were dumped on us when Michael Scott left The Office. However, the game does not do this. The game introduced characters throughout the show, new characters that were compelling, a little bit interesting, and we got to know them over time, rather than dumping these new variations of characters on us as soon as the main character leaves, which is the incorrect way to do it. So, in order for The Office to succeed like the game has in introducing these new characters and having a smooth transition, The Office should have introduced the new characters that they planned to keep around when Michael Scott left at least 2 seasons or maybe a season in advance, but not just after the character leaves. Then we feel like, as the audience, we're having characters thrown at us. So I would have liked if The Office did what the game did and given us these new characters just in slight bursts, not all at once like a dump of just new characters. For example, in the game again, we see our two main cast members, Kiara Whittaker and Blue, come into the series in the first episodes of season 7. We're given these two main characters who are given these storylines that mainly revolve around them on the first few episodes. And these characters are very familiar to us because we've seen slight variations of them on the show. But they're not boring enough to where we don't want to know anything about them because these actors have chemistry and they fit the theme of the show very well. And we're still given our old characters that we can still relate to. So in my opinion, The Office could have succeeded if it had just brought in these new characters that they wanted us to know, love, and care about earlier in the season. And I wish I would have enjoyed the last few seasons of The Office without Michael Scott there, like I did the game. But hopefully in the future, shows can learn from this and begin to use the game's way of introducing new characters. Now, I haven't finished the game yet, but I still enjoy the show without the two main characters, Melanie and Derwin, there. Let me know what you think in the comments, and be sure to check out my other videos, and feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Stay safe and have a nice day. Thank you for watching this video. Bye!